Hello and welcome to the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. This week we compare a Forester, we see two new Foresters, and a relationship is over before it even began. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love. All right, so we will kick things off with a comparison that we did between it was all new Forester last year, but we couldn't get it in time, so we have it this year, still 25, and the heavily updated Rogue from 24, which we also had a 25. And the reason we did this,
heavily is probably overselling it for the Rogue.
It's got that new grille.
Yeah.
So the reason behind this was, first off, these are two big sellers for their respective brands. And when we did our big compact-ish comparison 2 years ago, the Rogue finished highest amongst the non-hybrids, and the Forester was more mid-pack. So we wanted to see if the new one could beat it. And the short answer is it didn't. But that was probably more trim dependent than anything else.
Yes. So because of the logistics of getting cars from press fleets, we were not able to lock in a top trim Forester, but we did have a top trim Rogue. And so the Rogue just has, quite a lot of surprisingly premium features. And the Forester just doesn't. Although, as someone pointed out in the comments on the video, ventilated seats are available on the Forester, and they're not on the Rogue. However, that is only in Canada, as far as I can tell.
No, I believe it's on the Touring, which is their top trim in the US, and our Premier, which is our top trim in Canada.
It's weird. Like, they're listed on the spec sheet in Canada on the top trim, but you can't find ventilated anywhere on the listing on the US site. So maybe it's worded somewhere else. I don't know, but that's the one thing that you can't get on a Rogue.
And the Rogue, you could get some stuff that you can't, like you said, on the Forester. And I think if we had the top trim, the Touring / Premier, it might have done worse, because now you're just adding cost for, you don't get much more. You get the ventilated seats, and you get, I think, upgraded leather, and you can get them in brown. But as we said during the comparison, if you strip these down to mid trim and lower, I think the Forester wins quite easily, because it comes just as equipped, if not better, and some of the pros to it are still there. Whereas the Rogue, when you start stripping it down, loses some of its charm.
Yeah. Nissan's done a really great job of making it feel very premium up in the top end. But I think what Subaru's strength is that it's always like a really high-end Subaru doesn't feel right? Like, the whole concept of it doesn't make sense. And so Subaru kind of banks on this, like, usability, practicality. You're not afraid to scratch it. And so at a middle trim, it makes a lot more sense. Whereas the Rogue, just feels like it's being decontented. And so, maybe if we would have done, one up from base, this would have finished differently.
And even as we drove them and compared them, it was one of those, the Rogue was the better vehicle if you're just looking at the aspects. But the Forester's the one I probably would own, because just better sight lines and various conditions and a nicer rear seat slightly. And it's just, they both drive fine in the snow, as we showed in the video, but there's just something like you wouldn't worry about dirtying up or anything with the Forester. It's just got that sort of persona to it. So as we'll get to in a second, we hope to do this rematch in about a year, when they both have electric motors under their hoods as well, with the hybrid Forester and the plug-in Rogue. So we'll see if that happens, but
we're already saying the Rogue is more expensive now. Can you imagine adding a plug-in version?
True, but maybe it's got so much power and range, it's worth it. I don't know. The Outlander plug-in is easily the best thing Mitsubishi builds. And it's not just it's their best car in the lineup. It's a really good vehicle. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So moving on, as I mentioned, there was Forester news. Hey, the Forester goes hybrid. So I was in Chicago this week at the auto show where Subaru revealed two new SUVs, they said, which is really just two
Uh,
variants of the Subaru. But in fairness, this is the first time the Forester's gone hybrid for North America. It's been a hybrid in other regions previously using an older hybrid system. They call it the e-Boxer. So in North America, the US is calling it the hybrid, and there's going to be multiple trims. One starts sort of second from the base, which is awesome. Canada, it's going to be called the e-Boxer hybrid with the e-Boxer badges like Asia and Europe, but it'll only be top trim. I can't remember what the reasoning is, but basically, Canada has always allocated less vehicles. That's why a lot of these fancier ones get stuck at the high end because they want to sell what they get. So we might as well
yeah,
jack them up.
and Canadians tend to skew towards higher trims anyway than the U.S. markets, so I guess it makes sense. And I mean, look at Honda saying we're going to sell 50% hybrid CRVs for this current generation and made the hybrids only the top trims, and they've done it. So I understand why if you're going to pick just one trim, do the top one.
So getting a little deep into the specs here because that's all that really matters. This will get a little confusing, but so the Forester is using a new hybrid setup from Subaru, so one that they've newly developed using Toyota parts, but the hybrid parts, so the motors and battery, are from the last generation Toyota hybrid system, so not the one that's currently in the RAV4, for
Prius.
instance, and Prius.
Well,
Yeah, it doesn't.
because RAV4 is fourth gen, so RAV4 would be the same as this.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's the Prius. It doesn't have the better battery technology and everything. So but the difference from the Prius and the CX-50, which Mazda literally just took the drivetrain and shoved it in, including the rear motor, so they don't have to have an all-wheel drive connection. Subaru has put the traction and the generator motors between the engine and the transmission, and then
Mhm.
once you get past those, you're into their what do they call it? Lineartronic. Their CVT that then sends
Yeah.
power to all four wheels. So it's the real Subaru all-wheel drive system, the same CVT, the same clutch pack and everything, with the two shafts going out the side of the transmission and one going down the back. So, and they did that because Subaru owners expect some of this, and the percentage that will really use it is small, but it's one of those things that needs to be able to do it because that's part of what owning this is. And the ones who do want it, want it. And I mean, we've driven RAV4s, Priuses, and whatnot. That rear motor helps get going a bit in the snow, but it's not going to help power you up a muddy hill. There's very limited ability to that motor. So no efficiency numbers have been labeled yet, but they're expecting about 25% overall increase, 40% in the city, and that's always the big increase in hybrids because that's where it can stop and go. It'll be interesting because what?
I just want to interrupt for a sec. You did give us the total range while you were there, which is 580 miles.
Yeah, which is about 25% more.
Yeah,
Which is
and
what
the
they're saying.
fuel tank is the same, so we can work backwards and figure out the fuel economy figures. But
We can only figure out the average. We can't figure out city
Yeah.
and highway. But if it's 25, and this is already one of the most efficient gas vehicles in its segment, it always is because there's so fewer parts and weight. Like the Forester underweighs so many things, and that's the other thing. When you add all this stuff in, it will still probably be on the lighter end of the hybrids. So it's making 194 horsepower and no torque figure because Toyota never reveals the torque numbers of their system. We do know it's 100. Let's get this right: 162 horsepower and 154 pound-feet of torque for the 2.5 liter flat four. There's still a boxer engine as well, running the Atkins cycle, so that's why it's a little down on the power. And the electric motor is something like 118 horsepower and 199 pound-feet, something. But
that sounds like the Toyota one.
yes, but as we know, the electric motor power and torque start here, and the gas start at the bottom, and then they kind of intersect at some point. So that's why you can't just add horsepower from the two motors together, or the motor and the engine together, because you never have them both at peak. If you compare it to all the competitors, CRV, RAV4, the Korean ones, it's got less power than all of them. But until we drive it, we can't comment on it because, like I said, it's probably going to be lighter than all of them, and it's not that far down. And it's all about the way that electric motor delivers power. This can power just the wheels by gas. if needed, which some systems
Makes
can't
sense.
too. But yeah, I think it doesn't really matter, honestly, how the fuel economy or performance is. This thing's going to sell like crazy for Subaru because it's just a more efficient, more powerful Forester. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, yeah, if you say 25% better gas, people are like, okay, sure. And there's no other changes. Cool. All right. It is weird that they're not quoting torque because it's a mechanical system. So you should be able to measure it. Like Toyota doesn't quote it because their motor doesn't actually, there's a complication there. Because Toyota does measure torque on their truck hybrids because that
Yes.
goes directly through the transmission. And so this sounds like the same basic idea. So it's weird that we're not getting torque.
It's
But I
probably on
mean,
Subaru to have to figure it out. So they're just like, yeah,
yeah,
let's just
and
let's just go
like
with this.
and I don't think the current Forester is much lighter than most of the options in the class now. Um, but this actually sounds like it might make things a little easier because they are just sandwiching it in. So yeah, like I'm very much looking forward to doing another comparison. It's been 3 years. And I do find it really funny if we do CX-50 hybrid and RAV4 hybrid and Forester hybrid because they're all related but different.
Yeah, that's what I'd love to do once this and the Rogue are out, is just get everyone's hybrid because that's where this class is going. Like I said, Honda already, you only get the top trims. Subaru's going to offer multiple in the States, and Canada's going to start with the top. But I think, assuming it works how it's supposed to, it will take over. And I mean, we know the RAV4 hybrids in high demand. And yeah, so we'll see. I'm looking up the weight because I thought this thing was still very light because it's not new as as the chassis is supposed to be. But with the hybrid, it should be somewhat lighter because it only has the two motors and a small battery, whereas
Yeah,
some of them have that third motor powering the rear wheels, which just adds weight. Now
yeah.
they usually shrink their gas tanks, where Subaru doesn't. But
And then you don't have a physical like drive shaft, which saves a little bit of weight. Yeah, so it's it's going to be interesting.
oh yeah, this is a little heavy. It's 35 to 36. A lot
Eh,
of the competitors are pushing 4 still. Um, like
RAV4 is around there,
that's
not
still
far
pretty
off.
light.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, can't wait to try this one out.
So,
Moving,
Mike, you said
yeah,
there's another Forester?
yes, but first we have to talk about
Oh,
another
okay.
hybrid, a monstrous hybrid. So I'm curious to
Yes.
hear your thoughts on this because I was in Chicago with some fellow automotive writers and reviewers who gave me their thoughts on it. So I want to see what you think.
Of the 2025 Lexus LX 700H.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's weird that this vehicle launched without a hybrid. I It never really made sense to me that this was a flagship for a brand that is known for hybrids. I mean, not as known as Toyota, but still. Um, yeah, and so this makes a lot of sense in the case of, it's a flagship, it has more power, it has slightly better fuel economy. The Overtrail is the closest thing you'll get to a modern proper Land Cruiser on this side of the Atlantic. It has triple lockers. The only other vehicles you can buy new that have triples are the G Class from Mercedes and the Ineos. That's it.
And I totally put the LX as something I'd buy in off road like those two. it's
Well,
a little overkill, but
yeah, that's the thing is like you have to wonder like who's buying a six-figure luxury SUV to fling at a hardcore trail. Um, I mean, it does it. It does it very well.
I heard it was mentioned maybe once or twice that this hybrid system is about more power, not efficiency.
Yes, it is. 457 horsepower, like 583 pound-feet of torque. Um, so it's quicker. I mean, it also gains quite a lot of weight, like 400 or 500 pounds to do it. So it's not that much quicker day to day, but it is more responsive. And you and I just drove a regular gas one not too long ago. So it was good to be able to lean on that knowledge. Part of what, like we said before, the LX is such a niche offering. Like it's smaller than a lot of the options these days. It's pricey. It feels a little more truckish. Um, Weirdly, the F Sport one that I drove on this drive, the road biased trim, is weirdly good on a road, like a twisty road that was more LC than LX, and yet like it stayed very composed. It has that hydraulic suspension like we had on our tester, so it stays very flat. I cooked the brakes a little bit, but it's 6,200 pounds. What do you expect?
That's heavy. So unlike the RX and the NX, where the hybrids are sort of some of the sweet spots, this is you want an LX and you want the ultimate LX, then you step up because it gets way more expensive and you get a lot more power, a lot more weight, and you're not getting it because of the efficiencies. Just like this going up against not head to head, but sort of like the M's and the AMGs on the Japanese side, saying like, oh, well, I have almost 500 horsepower too.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not as sporty as those, of course, but you want the best. Like,
yeah,
I've said before that the new GX is very cool and it does most of what this does off road, but you can't get massaging semi-aniline leather seats in a GX. You can't get a lot of features on that you can get on this, right? This has that crazy ultra luxury model, the 4-seat one with the full recline seat where you can power the front passenger seat up to, use the ottoman. Like it is
so the
a
person
flagship.
in the back can be stretched right out while you're climbing rocks with all your lockers engaged.
No, because the ultra luxury doesn't have the triple lockers. Only the Overtrail does.
So they're totally 3 completely mechanical lockers, right? We're not talking electronic lockers. Oh, are we?
Yeah, they're electronically controlled lockers. There is a mechanical one, the central one.
I'm sure the center is for sure.
Yeah.
But the front and rear, I'd be curious what exactly is in there. But
I mean, it did everything really well, surprisingly well. Yeah, I don't know. It's the things that make it
700H TRD Pro.
The things that make it not a great seller to most people looking for a full size SUV are what make it a really fun off-roader. Like it's smaller, right? So it's a little bit easier to maneuver. Yeah, it's Lexus doing its own thing.
I honestly think Lexus has kind of done themselves a disservice by pushing this as their flagship luxury SUV all these years, and not like the G-Wagon pushing its off-road ability, and it just happens to be super luxurious, because that's why people buy a G-Wagon. They're not taking them off-road. They want to have that image around town. This doesn't really have that image. I mean, we know how good it is, but I don't think the average person would even have a clue. But so we went from hybrid SUV to hybrid SUV that could off-road to an SUV that off-roads. See? Huh? So the other all new Forester all new SUV is a version of the Forester that is returning, and it is the Wilderness, which was a no-brainer because the Wilderness was like, I can't believe it took so long for Subaru to bring something like this out. I should start counting, but I would guarantee I see as many latest gen Outbacks as Wilderness as non. Like everyone's buying the Wilderness. The Forester, not so much, which I was surprised about. And the Crosstrek, I see a lot of those too. So this again it won't be a top trim. So it'll be sort of like the Outback where it's positioned in the middle. So that'll be nice because I can't remember where the last one was. But it gets all the usual stuff. I mean, it's almost an exact replica formula that they had for the last one, which no surprise. It's got 9.3 inches of ground clearance, so it goes up over half an inch, which is crazy high for the class. No one's close to that. I don't even, like the Trailhawk doesn't even get that high from the Cherokee. It's there's different coils, different suspension tuning. It, of course, has the 17-inch alloys with the Geolander all-terrain tires. It has underbody protection, which doesn't really differ much from the normal Forester, and I put my hand on there, and a lot of it's plastic, so protection to a degree. I mean, you can buy aftermarket steel plate ones, which you should.
And it's still more than what some of the off-roady trims of its competitors do.
Oh, yeah. This one has capability for sure. It's got the tow hooks front and rear with their anodized copper covers, and on the other bits, it has a cool symmetrical where they have it in the new Forester on that rear pillar behind the back window. It's in that copper, so that's kind of cool. The X mode is the big thing with these vehicles, so it actually has a smaller final drive ratio than the regular CVT, so it can spin faster off-road. And apparently, I didn't get into too many details, but it can mimic better the high or low gear for off-roading. So you can like really lock it down so you are doing like a low gear crawl. It's got the double X mode.
That's worse than electronic lockers.
I know, but I mean, unless you're body on frame, you can't have that, really.
Yeah.
I know Jeep has done it with the Grand Cherokee and stuff, but this will easily be the most capable compact SUV thing, besides the Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk. And I'd love to put the two together because I think this could do better. Like
Cherokee Trailhawk, that doesn't exist yet, Mike.
Oh, the new one hasn't come out yet?
No, they haven't even confirmed that it will be called Cherokee.
Yeah, I'm talking about the old one, the one that.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I know they don't make it still, but the new it was the only thing that came close, and I think they've improved. This still has the graphic on the hood, and on the inside you have the bronze material here and there, and wilderness badging everywhere. But yeah, it just looks funny because it always has, because it's just jacked up so high for its proportions. But
yeah,
why mess with something that's working? So. Again, and they'll sell this well.
I mean, I'm sure it's fairly capable, but also, as you kind of mentioned with the hybrid before, I think most people are buying it just for the idea that it is, right? Like, people probably aren't buying it to actually take it seriously off-roading. But as we've covered before with the Wilderness and other trims like it, they tend to ride better than other trims, and so like, why not?
Back to our comparison, what we're saying. I think this and its siblings, not the Outback so much, but the Crosstrek, I think this is the most likely vehicle someone will buy new and go start trashing it off-road, because the Subaru lifestyle that people think they have, and like we said with the Forester, you don't feel as bad for some reason. Like, Subaru, they're tough, they're rugged, you're supposed to beat on them, so I don't think you care so much about scratching. I mean, if you're a real serious overlander, you're buying a used Forester or Crosstrek and modifying it yourself. But some of the videos they showed of what this is doing, and I've been on some programs, like, they are crazy capable for what it started out as. But yeah, it'll just be another option. That family is now kind of grown. I mean, why not? It's almost like the Foresters becoming Subarus, like Mustang, where it's like, what else can we do? So
there's going to be a V8 one soon and a manual. Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? And I'm just going to point out, if they keep going down this path by the next generation, I think the entire front end is just going to be black plastic cladding.
Yeah. The front and the rear are a lot, but it looks like, I'm not a huge fan of it normally, and it doesn't look great. But I was thinking, you know what? The things, if you actually go on trails, that get scratched are your front and rear bumpers from the branches and twigs, and down the side by the wheel wells that are also. So they're protecting the right things. And I mean, the Outback kind of started that, but it does look kind of strange.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if you want a Forester now, are you an efficient hybrid driver? Are you a serious off-roader? Do you want just a base model to have the basics, or do you want one that has ventilated seats? So they're covering everything. So moving on to, I think this is our last story of the week. We've talked about this for weeks on end. The Nissan-Honda partnership that was for sure happening when we talked about this last week is probably dead. And if you keep hearing the stories and the reports and the rumors, it's all over the place. But basically, during I don't know if it was in a press conference or a press release leading up, Honda basically said Nissan was going to be one of its subordinate brands. Like, Honda was on top and Nissan was below it, and Nissan didn't like that, and I don't blame them.
It looks like during the talks, Honda's CEO floated that, and Nissan apparently really didn't like it, and so Nissan has walked away. But from my understanding, it's like, aren't you the ones that need the deal? Like, Honda doesn't need this.
And I mean, it like we talked about, Nissan had the trucks to give Honda logically for other markets. Like, that's just what we're speculating, right?
Yeah.
But Nissan and the EV tech, I mean, Honda's their new, but Nissan has some proven stuff, so they could kind of brainstorm together. But Nissan kind of, I think, needs the Civic and Accord platform, and maybe not the CRV because the Rogue's good, but some of Honda's really good platforms to massage into their own car, sort of like Kia and Hyundai do. But yeah, and obviously the big elephant is they need money.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know where this goes, because I mean, them and Mitsubishi are still partnered up, but neither of those are the one you lean on. So I don't think Nissan's going to disappear, but yeah, who knows? We'll see.
It's weird because the other rumor is that Foxconn wants them, and Foxconn, builder of iPhones, and I think they're trying to get into the electric car market. Nissan, if you get bought by them, you're not going to end up as anything other than a subsidiary. Like it's weird, but obviously we don't know any of the details. None of this has been confirmed yet. Neither OEM has said for sure that the deal's dead. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week because this is the ongoing saga.
It is. And I mean, Nissan can, reach out to maybe Volvo, Aston Martin, some of those other companies. And, for some, it's been a success being owned by non-automotive ventures, and some not so much. So, yeah. All right. So that is it. We are going to take a break on the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. And when I come back, I will be talking to Greg. This week, I think we're talking about hand tools, which are very important if you want to do anything on your car, like even change your license plate. And after that, we'll take a bit of a longer break, and Kyle will be back to talk with Jonny Lieberman about his journey in the auto industry. So we will be back in a couple seconds. Swapping out your tires? There's nothing like it. With eBay, you'll find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay, things people love. All right, we have Greg back to talk about more products, and what are we going to discuss today?
Hey, Mike. Well, I think it's good to talk about tools. This is a car show, and tools are fun. It's always fun to get some new tools. And today we're going to talk about just some basic tools that you should have to work on your car. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of tools at car shows, but I think this is the other way around. So what is the most needed tool, do you think, if you have a car?
Oh, so many, actually. I would think you could name one, but you got to go with wrenches. Wrenches are always important. You can find a good one. You can find them on Amazon. You go to Ace Hardware, wherever you want to go. We recommend this one called the Swan Lake. It's a 32-piece combination wrench set. That's a good one. But also, I think I have a very old Craftsman set with some ratchets, all sorts of wrenches and sockets in there. I think you also want to just kind of think, hey, what are you comfortable with? What's a brand you like? What do you trust? That sort of thing. So that's, a good place to start. You gotta have wrenches. You gotta have screwdrivers. I have my oldest screwdriver is, gosh, it's not even mine. It was probably my dad's. So it's 50 years old. You gotta have things like that. Torque wrenches, depending on what you're doing, those are important. Especially if you need to be specific. And then I think just to make things very basic, vice grips. I don't always have the things we recommend on here, but I have something very close to this set in the story that we're showing here. It's a very good set of vice grips. They'll get you through a lot of things. And yeah, that's the basics. You gotta have wrenches, pliers, and things like that. Screwdrivers, hammers.
I think if you're not tearing down an engine or fabricating parts, most of us can do most things on a car just with ratchets, wrenches, and screwdrivers.
Yeah.
Cars are put together that way, and they come apart that way. And if you're doing tires, which I do a lot of winter tire turnovers for myself and family, the torque wrench, like you said, is huge. I actually have an impact gun, helps get the lugs on and off, and an air compressor. And with those three things, I can do a full tire swap in 20 minutes, where if you don't have the right tools, it can sure take a while. And a lot of stuff I've done to cars, I've been happy to have the right tools, and if I'm missing, I have to go get some more. You touched on it briefly. It's pretty important to have a high quality set as well.
Yeah, the set I've had, my base set, it's actually just this Craftsman homeowners set. I think I got it probably when we moved into this house, quite a few years ago. And it's gotten me through a lot of things, both inside and out in the garage with the cars. I actually just got a new license plate for my personal car. I was in between press cars, and I thought, geez, I'm driving around with an expired license plate. It's time to get the new one on there. I went with a retro throwback one from the 1950s and 60s, and I busted out my ratchet set. Used it to get some really rusty bolts off of this thing. I think they were probably on with the original plate. Put the green and white plate on this car. It's a 2006 Charger, and it looks really sharp. But, it was to your point, the right tools make all the difference. I was trying to like muscle it with this like flathead screwdriver. I put enough WD-40 on there to like, I mean, I don't even know. I put so much WD-40 on there. I'm hitting it with the hammer. And then I'm like, dude, your ratchet set's right in front of you. Figure out what the right size is and be done. And in like 10 minutes, I was done. I mean, I guess it gave me something to talk about on the show this week, but there's better ways to do it. And I still like Craftsman, but it's important to find a good set of wrenches.
I think looking at our list will help people because when I was younger and was amassing my tool set and filling out my my tool chest, I would get the deals at the local hardware stores where you get so many pieces, 60% off for so little. And I learned over the years, they work for a bit and then they break. And then when you spend a bit of money on a quality set, they last much longer. And in the long run, you're saving money. So I'm doing that now. And I mean, eBay Motors is another great place. You can buy a lot of these sets and sometimes get deals there. So it's one of the areas I think cheaping out does not pay off.
Tools as a whole aren't like mind-blowingly expensive. When you think that like when you get something cheap, and I'll go back to this this hand like chainsaw I got, like not exactly for cars, but I was using it and the like the belt, the chain slipped off and just cut right through the like the kind of the grip. It missed my hand by like an inch. And I thought to myself, it's about $100. Was that really worth the Amazon sale? Maybe spending a little bit more money, keeping all 10 of your fingers is probably worth the extra benefit. Now, with car stuff, it's, you're not usually like using chainsaws, I hope, on your car, but to me, that's a good example. And it kind of crystallized for me, like, most of the tools that go in your garage don't really come out. So let's make them good ones.
Yeah, like wrenches, I mean, unless it's inferior actual metal, so they start to bend at the teeth, that's not a big concern. I mean, the nicer ones won't start to corrode as fast, but the ratchets is a big one. You buy a discount set of ratchets, I mean, the bits will be fine, but the amount of ratchets where, you just blow the top right off it or just start spinning with no grip. So yeah, I think it's important to get a good set, especially if you plan to do, I'd say, any kind of work. I mean, if you're never touching your car, that's fine. But even if you're just changing air filters and putting on license plates, like still having good tools is there. And then if you're getting a little more into taking bumpers off and doing exhaust like stuff like I do, then you want specialty tools. But yeah, it definitely pays off.
It definitely makes a difference in the sense that it makes your life so much easier. Like I probably would have gotten this license plate off after a while, but having this pretty solid set of Craftsman ratchets allowed me to like size it up, get it done. I enjoyed doing it. Makes me more interested in like, hey, what else? Little maintenance, little chores should I do? And it just kind of makes your life a little bit better. You feel like you're competent, like you're doing things. I used this also set of ratchets on when my refrigerator motor broke a few years ago. It just broke and the bolts were all just rusted on. And I went into the garage. I was like, I haven't used this in a while. Was able to get the top off. I installed it with just a fan and it ran for another year. So it worked out pretty well at the time, and frankly, it was a lifesaver because the refrigerator died in I think March of 2020 when the world shut down and trying to get a refrigerator was pretty tough. So it worked out pretty well. So, got to give a shout out to Craig Cole, who's an occasional contributor to Auto Guide. His story on here, it really goes through all the things we've talked about. You can check out some of those links too, click through. You can also kind of look at adjacent tools. Like maybe you like this one, but you don't need to spend that much money. There's always another good choice you could spend too. Find something that might maybe fit your needs if you don't need to be as, intense as some of these things too.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Greg, and we will talk to you again next week about some new products.
See you later, Mike. Always fun.
Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can handle, you start to think to yourself, you know what, I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks and struts, and this baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there. It's unreal. From wipers and headlights to cold air intakes, exhaust systems, and even that turbo you've had on your mind, eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major, and mods are always intense, so you need to know that these parts guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And in the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back, simple as that. You know what you love more than the car itself is driving it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance, and you're locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see the green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at your car you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. All right, welcome back. We have a very special guest with us this week. If you could just reintroduce yourself as I think you're our first returning guest.
Hi there. I am Jonny Lieberman. I write about cars. I make podcasts about cars. I make videos about cars. Most people know me from Motor Trend. More and more these days, people know me from Spike's Car Radio. It's a podcast I do here with Spike Feresten, who, if you don't know Spike, he wrote the Soup Nazi episode of Seinfeld. And he's a pretty big, he's not a big car collector, but he has some important Porsches and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if listeners missed you last time, they should go back and find that episode because you gave us some good stories about all that. It was quite interesting with Jerry and him and everything. So
yeah, I mean, look, we did a live podcast at like Luft Gekult 7 or something, and somebody said, "What's the secret to doing a good car podcast?" And he said, "Make sure Jerry Seinfeld is a cast member." So
yes,
that's
maybe
the secret. Yeah.
Easy.
Maybe the future it'll be if Johnny's on your show, it'll be successful.
Well, I hope it helps someone.
Yeah, and I hope, like I've heard your podcast; it's really good. So people check that out. And as you said, you're on Motor Trend a lot on the interwebs, and a little lower budget, but we do some on ours. So if you can go back to what got you started with cars or in this industry.
Well, cars, I just think I kind of like fell out of the womb in love with cars. My dad used to tell the story when he had my dad, by the way, is Canadian, from Montreal. But he had a 280Z, 2+2 Datsun 280Z that when my sister was born, he sold his Honda Civic CVCC because he wanted something more practical. Wow. Let you know where his head was at.
Smart.
Yeah, well, I had a bigger back seat, than 2 car seats fit in the Z better than the Civic, I guess. But I painted a racing stripe on it when I was about a year old. I could barely walk, and I somehow got a can of white house paint open, and it was like a copper kind of orange color, and I was very proud of myself. But my dad loved cars and just talked my ear off about it, and I was there for it. I loved cars as well, and when I was 5, I was desperate to get a go-kart. And then I really, once that kind of wasn't happening, I noticed Sears was selling riding lawnmowers, and I was constantly begging for a riding lawnmower because I thought I could drive it. So I just always really liked cars, and I just always paid attention to cars. And a lot of my close friends, because most people don't like cars. They see them as a burden and something that takes all their money and they got to worry about and fix and tires and clean, just things they hate. And so when I got into this, a lot of my friends were like, "What? You like cars?" And I'm like, "No, I literally know everything there is to know. I know I could yell a car and I'll tell you the engine displacement, torque, and horsepower. It doesn't matter." And I've been that way since I was 9. Just when I discovered car magazines, I just ingest those numbers. It's weird. And then professionally speaking, it's one of those funny things. I never really had a plan. I just went to college and just kind of studied, and I loved studying. And I was a philosophy and religious studies major, which if you think about Chevy versus Ford, it's actually it's Protestant versus Catholic. It's kind of the best training you can get for this industry. And when I was 25, I was working for a software company, and .com bubble burst, and suddenly I didn't have a job, and I cold called Motor Trend just because I was in LA, Motor Trend's in LA, and I said, hey, like, and I remember, I'll leave the guy unmentioned because he's still sort of in the industry, but he's like, oh, you'll never work for us, kid. Like, but he gave me really good advice. He said, like, but if you want to, go find a smaller publication and write for them, first, and then you can work your way to Motor Trend. And of course, being an absolute moron at age 25, like most 25-year-olds are, I was like, oh, screw this. I never really thought about it again. Fast forward, I was 30, and it's 20 years ago, and I was working at a art school. Perfectly fine job, not hard to call it a career, but good job, stable. Worked and built the website for an art school, and it was updated daily and blah blah. And I turned 30, and I couldn't figure out how to goof off, because I was able to like get all my work for my work for the day done in like an hour or so. 30th birthday, kind of, I don't know, I never really put any stock in age or anything, and I'm sitting there, I just couldn't even find a website I wanted to read. Everything I checked every day, and I don't know if it's a voice or a revelation or what, but this sentence came into my head like, hey, if you don't get up out of this chair and walk out the door, this is gonna happen when you're 40, and another decade of your life will be gone, and you'll still be in this stupid office. And it just really, like, I panicked. And so anyways, I knew a lot about cars. I knew I was a pretty strong writer. I did a lot of writing for various things, like movie reviews and stuff like that. So I just said, okay, this is what I want to do. And there used to be, I don't know, it might still be up, but there was a website called The Truth About Cars. And at the time,
We own it.
Yeah, but at the time, in 2005, it was just Robert Farrago. And I liked what he did. He wrote these really tidy, kind of hard-hitting reviews, and they got more hyperbolic. But at the time, they weren't quite as nuts as the site became. And I just wanted to review cars. I had no axe to grind. And I wrote him and said, hey, like, I'd like to write for you. And he said, like, yeah, find a car, review it, and send it to me, and I'll let you know. And my buddy had remember the Saab 93X, the Subaru.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a WRX. I was kind of cheating, but I grabbed that and I drove it up Angeles Crest and wrote a review about it. And sent it to Robert. And long story short, he was like, yeah, okay, you can write for me. And started sending me like press cars, and then. I think my big break, which happened real quick, was Davey Johnson. I don't know if you remember Davey G. Johnson, but he was working for Jalopnik, and this is he was like the second employee hired at Jalopnik, and I had met him, true story, at a strip club here in Hollywood called Jumbo's Clown Room, and we quickly decided, rather than looking at naked girls dancing, we were going to stand outside, smoke cigarettes, and talk about cars for 4 hours, which we did. And then I lost touch with him. I just met him that one night, and we really hit it off. And I think, I don't know, we just lost touch. But anyways, I wrote something, and then he reposted it on Jalopnik, and I was like, "Whoa, Davey! I remember it was a fun night." And then like within a week, I was writing for Jalopnik as well. So I was kind of like doing like car reviews for The Truth About Cars and doing like car opinion pieces for Jalopnik. And this was back when Jalopnik, we were really small, but everybody kind of read us. We always said it was like the Velvet Underground. Like, nobody bought the record, but every single person who read us is now like a working automotive journalist, which had this weird outsized influence on the industry. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were just screwing around. And then, I did that. I was at Edmunds very briefly. I was at Autoblog for a couple of years. And then in 2010, Angus McKenzie, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of Motor Trend, he, again, long story short, said, come, let's have lunch. And you want to be work for Motor Trend? And I said, yeah, I do. And, 15 years later, still working for Motor Trend. So it's sort of worked out.
It's funny hearing your story. How parallel some of the things are with me. I mean, I did not have a family that was into cars, so I had no influence. It was all me. I just was always into them. But just sort of how you said all your friends aren't and you are. That's me too. And Kyle and I talked about this a couple podcasts ago, how it actually helps because you understand what a normal person thinks of cars and not you're surrounded by gearheads and then your opinion gets skewed. Like there's a reason why a boring car sells so well, because that's what people want. I owned a Saab 9.2X at one point, an Aero turbo, so I know
Saab
that car
9,
really well.
I said 9.3. It was a Saab 9.2. Sorry. What's
the 9? What was the 9? Was there 9.3X?
9.3X was the 900. They renamed it the 9.3.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
then the 9.7X was the Envoy, right?
The Chevy Trailblazer with the key and the ignition was in the center. That's all.
Yes, it had to be. But and then around 30, I was working at Auto Trader Canada, and I would be done my work on board, and I started. Someone there said I could start blogging because we sponsored the auto show here in Toronto, and I enjoyed that much more. When I was a kid, for me, it was Car and Driver. That was the one that like I'm gonna work here one day. So
when I was a kid, it was Car and Driver. Like first of all, Motor Trend before Angus showed up, it's no big secret. Motor Trend sucked. It was awful. And I religiously read Car and Driver, Automobile, and Road and Track. And I remember my mom got me a Motor Trend subscription, and then I asked her, please don't renew it because it was just such a bad magazine compared to the others.
See, like back there's probably every Car and Driver from like, I don't know, about 95 to 02 before I went off to school. And I went to university and I did I did communications, I had no idea what I was going to do with myself type thing too. And so
real quick, I'll tell you another funny Motor Trend story. So when I was writing for Autoblog, like back in the day, like Autoblog and Jalopnik, part of what was done was like if like, I'm making this up, but if Lightning Lap, Car and Driver does Lightning Lap. It's and then might have I actually may not be making it. This actually might have been what it is. And so what we would do was, we had no Autoblog ain't doing Lightning Lap. You know what I mean? Like if I had met a coworker in person, that was a big deal. We ain't gonna get 15 cars together and rent a track. And I remember at Autoblog, we did one comparison test when I was there. And this was begging and begging, and then we're like, maybe we could get a motel room. And they're like, whoa, slow your roll.
Yeah.
So Car and Driver would do Lightning Lap, and then somebody would like make a post about it because you got paid by the post and you're always looking for content. And hey, go to Car and Driver, read this. So Ed Lowe, who's now after Angus, he became the editor-in-chief of Motor Trend. Now he's actually the vice president of content or some name like that. He sent me like a Facebook message, and he's like, hey, like, I see you're posting Car and Driver stuff. Like, why aren't you? And this is back when Autoblog was like the 900-pound gorilla in the room. We just had traffic. It was this machine. Why don't you post Motor Trend? And I'm knowing me, I said it to him out loud. I'd like to think I said it internally, but I was like, well, Motor Trend sucks. Like, why would I post anything you guys did? And then he sent me, I think at the time it became Best Driver's Car, but the first year they did it was called Best Handling Car. Mm-hmm. And I had just driven the Mazda RX-8. Oh boy, I can't.
R3.
R3. I was going to say R2, R3. And
I was an RX-8 owner, so I know that one pretty well too.
And that was one of the best cars I'd ever driven. Like literally incredibly wonderful sports car. And I was like, I don't know what I was thinking when I opened up the Motor Trend article, but I'm like, oh, they'll probably have it last place because they don't know anything. And then it was like, third, and in front of it was like an M3 and a 911 or something like that. I was like, all right, like maybe these guys know something. And that was sort of where I realized Motor Trend had changed, but Angus showed up in 2003. I didn't make that realization until 2009. And not to blow Angus's horn too much, but like he always said this about like car brands where, if you're trying to turn around Lincoln or something like that, you actually have to build good cars for a decade before anybody notices. And then it's another 10 years of then promoting the fact that you did something good 10 years ago, so it's a 20-year process. So.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That's like our site was really big back in the day, and then it kind of got abandoned, and Kyle was the one that came back to start it up, and he and I are, we're slowly working it back up, but I've been here now over 3 years, and he's been here, 5 years? but
5 and a bit, yeah.
we're starting to see sort of, it get back, but it takes a while. Your thing about comparisons is hilarious, because when I started working at my old company and then it came to this one, and part of the reason I got hired here was because I was such a car and driver and road and track and motor trend, but most car and driver, I was like, if you're reviewing cars, you gotta do shootouts. So I'd always arrange these like 8 car, 10 car, and it was a lot of work, but to me, like, I thought that's what you did. And then I started to realize up here that just doesn't happen. So we've continued it, and it is a lot of work, but what you see at the end, like, it's such a good way to find out a class or a segment. And
and again, I mean, that's, it's hard to explain, like, but driving, the same cars on the same road, the same day, same conditions, it really does tell you what you need to know. And then it also makes you think in terms of competitive sets of cars. So, it's one thing to say, like, oh, I love, Ferrari's the best car. Sure, Ferrari's the best car. However, like, what's the best compact sedan? And there is a right answer, but you can't just, you can't intuit it. You got to get them all together, drive them, and like, oh, okay, it's the Civic. Yeah, the Civic's really good.
It is a Civic, but sometimes
it's usually the Civic.
But it's funny because
as a proud Toyota owner, yeah, it's the Civic.
It's funny how you bring that up, because sometimes you drove a car and you have an amazing impression or terrible, and you just keep thinking that. So when you drive cars, like, it's not as good as this, or it's better than that. And then when you bring them together again, you're like, oh, that car wasn't as good, or that car is better than I thought.
Yeah, totally. And then, the other thing is you get like launch blindness, where, you go to launch where, the roads, especially off-road stuff, is like really optimized for the car. Like, I remember the really bad Ford Explorer. So this was like the 2010 Ford Explorer.
Yes.
They had this off-road course. I'll never forget. It was like all the hard stuff, you were pointed downhill, right? There was nothing, there was no hard climbing. It was like,
yeah.
And then they were so weird. They brought along a Jeep Grand Cherokee, a contemporary Jeep Grand Cherokee. And I remember I was with Dan Neal. We were driving partners, and we're driving, and we're both like, the Grand Cherokee is 10 times better, right? Like, yeah, it's 10. Like, why would they do this? But I wrote like a decent enough review, because, you're basically, the Grand Cherokee is only for the off-road section. And again, downhill, kind of anything will go over something when you're, gravity's on your side. And then when we wrote the review, I mean, we savaged the Explorer. Not only do we think it, I think we said it was an intellectually dishonest vehicle for a number of reasons, but it also, when we had, like, parts fell off of it while we were driving it. And again, we had 4 other vehicles in the review. And to the point where I bought, that was in 2010, I wrote this review. And again, we're very harsh. I feel defensively so. In 2015, I bought a Fiesta ST, and a Ford PR guy rings a coworker and says, is this true? And he's like, yeah, no, he really bought a Fiesta ST. And the guy goes, but Johnny hates Ford. And it's like, I don't give a fuck about Ford, pardon my French. I hated the Explorer. I happened to be writing like 10 best cars I drove in 2014. And it was like Pagani Huayra, that's pretty good. AMG 6x6 was cool. Fiesta ST's third. And then I'm like, they're 20 grand. I should go buy one. It's a no-brainer.
That car was amazing. Like, Focus ST was nice, but when I drove that, like you said, it was cheaper, it was more nimble. I wasn't in the market for a car then, but I totally would have grabbed one, and I, in hindsight, wish I did.
It was, I was about to pull the trigger. It was mostly going to be my wife's car, and my wife, when we got together, I had a bunch of WRXs, and she wound up like driving and really liking a WRX, and just powerful little compact manual thing. And it was going to be her car, because she had a really hunk of shit Ford Focus that was finally just done. I was going to get her. She was going to be commuting for law school, and I was going to get her like a BMW i3, just because carpool lane and blah blah blah. And California, if you have an EV, you can go in the carpool lane. And then I drove it, and I hated the i3. I thought it was a really miserable car, about as far away from a BMW as you can get. And I love the Fiesta, and I was like, it gets like, probably, 30 some miles a gallon or whatever it got. Like, who cares? And yeah, so, but that's the industry in a nutshell. But back to your point, you can get on a launch, you can get blinded, or you drive a car by itself, and like, it seems pretty good. But when you put 2 of them together or 9 of them together, it's like, oh,
just two real quick things. That Fiesta, even with the 1 liter turbo 3-cylinder, that thing was fun with a manual.
We never got it in the States. We never,
I know.
you know, yeah.
We did. But to your thing, like there's plenty of cars where I've driven on the launch, and yeah, they put you in the optimal position. So they're purposely, except for this one you said where they brought a Cherokee, they're trying to show its best attributes. And then when you get it for life, you're like, oh, and there's a certain 3-row SUV that I won't name that Kyle and I had very briefly, and we're like, this is really good. And then when we started getting it for week-long reviews and comparisons, we were like, maybe there's some issues with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why it's important to get cars after their launch, but you have to do the launch because everyone wants to know right away what's it going to be like.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and I think something that I don't think I'm speaking out of term here, where I think we all agree, like what's so fascinating about this and what makes it interesting to drive something like a Corolla or a Civic as well as a Pagani is like fitness for purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Greg and I were just talking about that today, of like, that is really, at the end of the day, like what makes a really good car is how good it does the job it was meant to do. And sometimes you get in a car after the launch and you're like, oh, actually, never mind.
Yeah, it's funny. So we, when we do our of the year programs, one of our criteria, we don't say fitness of purpose. We say performance of intended function. And, and so it's like, how minivan of a minivan is it? How SUV of an SUV is it? And that is, it's one of our 6 criteria we use. That's how we can have a 911 and a Civic in the same of the year program and say, actually, this one. And again, what you're doing too is you're not ever comparing a 911 to a Civic, because that's stupid. What you're doing is you're saying, all right, we're experts. We've driven everything that the Civic competes with in its competitive set. How well does it stack up to that competitive set? And if it moves the needle against the existing cars, okay, how well then does it hit our 6 criteria we use to come up with car of the year? And and that's generally speaking, and look, I don't want to say mistakes, but some years, no one's happy with the result. It's democracy. It's really problematic. But that the winner is the one that hits hardest against the 6 criteria. It's not which one is the most fun on the racetrack. It should be, if I was running things, but I'm not.
Well, first off, the experts are the commentators on YouTube that will say you are comparing the Civic to the 911, and how could you do that? But
I know
it's funny in hindsight, because we've picked them too, and you go back and you look at some of these car of the years or comparison winners, and you're like, what was I thinking? But at the time, it seemed like the right answer. But I mean, I think the 91 Caprice won one year somewhere, but
the 1997 Chevy Malibu was Motor Trend's car of the year.
I would say that I get that, and look, it wasn't always. Once Angus showed up, it was a very clean award that was, and I've been through it. I haven't been to 15 in a row, but I've probably done like 13 car of the years and that many SUV of the years and truck of the years and performance vehicle of the year. It's sadly it's a vote, and that part kind of kills me. But before that it wasn't always clean. But for instance, if you go back to like the Renault Alliance one in '83, okay,
that makes sense back here.
Yeah, you can laugh at that. Go back to 1983 and tell me the new cars in 19. And back then, remember, it was American cars only. Renault squeaked in because there was a factory in Wisconsin. But go ahead and show me the American car in '83 that was better than a Renault Alliance. I will wait. It was stuff like the Dodge 600, the Mercury Montego. You go back to the 91 Caprice. Okay, name the American car in '91 that was better than a Caprice.
It's funny because I bought at a garage sale years ago, like a decade ago, all these I think from 80 to 85 Motor Trend magazines. And I've read them, and they used to do the car of the year, and then they also would do an import car of the year as well. And when you read them, it's like the import car of the year, it's like 3 fantastic cars and one squeaks out, and then you're like, oh well, the Citation lost to the Escort. So it's like
but like should the Escort have won? Like, wasn't this like
exactly like, and then it's like the new Accord won import, and you're like, well, that would have been way better. But that was the state of the industry back then.
It was the state of the industry, and again, Angus, and that actually might have gone away before Angus, but he threw the sales team out of editorial, like basically. And and I've heard people say like, oh, car of the year, you guys are paid, and I'm like, I will take cash. Like I want money. You got BMW bucks, you got Chevy cash, I will take it. They've never offered, and I've been in the room many times, and it's literally a vote. We vote on it. We have ballots. We vote. We talk about it afterwards. I know the morons have voted for the wrong car, and like it's and we have like internal things like, we'll say like, I don't know, like 1 year, the S-Class, this was like 2012 or something, it probably should have won. And so those of us that voted for it, like a secret handshake, like S-Class was robbed,
Yeah.
But again, another car was voted, and it's you get 11 professional automotive journalists or car writers, whatever you want to call us, together. You spend a week more evaluating all these cars, same roads, and we go to a proving ground, and we do it. We have a repeatable 27-mile loop that does like city driving, back road, freeway, and then we talk about it for a day, and then we vote, and that's how we get the result.
So Kyle and I are pretty familiar with this because we're part of some associations of reviewers and journalists. Imagine like 70 of them voting for the car of the year in Canada. And I would say of the like 10 years I've been a member, maybe 2 I agreed with the winner because it's a vote. So it's what's the majority. And some of them maybe were my like 3rd or 4th choice. And sometimes you're like, what? Like, what was everyone else driving that I wasn't? But I think part of it is it's changed a lot recently. But like what you're saying, the intention of the purpose of the vehicle, I think people focus too much on like how nice it was or how well it drove, like how handily it was. It's like someone doesn't care about that in Yukon. And current owner and former employee of Subaru, some people in our industry like just rip it apart and can't understand why anyone would buy a Subaru. And it's like because the people who buy them don't care about the things you care about. They want something they can see out of.
Can I ask a question? Because I don't know anyone in my Motor Trend circle, for lack of a better term, that has anything bad to say about Subaru. So why would someone not like a Subaru? What's the reasons?
The ones I hear is CVT over and over again, and it's like we're so beyond that. They're ugly, same shape. Yeah, ugly, same shape. Their interiors aren't nice. And I said, but that's what attracts some people is they're very functional. Like people like them because they're boring squares, because they're anonymous and they can see out. Because it is like every time you get in, let's say a Forester or Crosstrek to its competitors, you're like, oh, the windows and belt are so much lower, and like that's what people buy them. Like they're not buying.
He hates when I say this, but Dom Infante is the head of communications for Subaru. Maybe over some drinks one night, I was commenting on how ugly some Subaru was, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, we don't have designers to pay, and we pass the savings on to our customers." And I've quoted that like 100 times over the past decade, and it makes his skin crawl. But yeah, they're not particularly great looking, but they're.
I just saw them yesterday. I was in California with Subaru, so I saw them.
Yeah, and I don't think they're supposed to be good looking. It's part of the kind of anti-car club, like.
Yeah, they're setting sales records all the time, so they're doing what customers want. They're their customers, maybe not the majority, but you're selling to who you know.
Nothing but sales increases year on year, going back like 15 years, and in the States, Subaru outsells Volkswagen like more than 2 to 1, like Volkswagen. So it's a very successful brand and very loyal customer. I've bought 2, they're great. So.
Yeah,
I've owned many. So
I want to take it back to a subject we touched on earlier in this talk. I know we're going a little long, but
whatever, man.
You mentioned, you mentioned Jalopnik and like the future of the industry, and so I mean, we're talking about how we all got our starts. Where do you see the next Jalopnik? Because I agree with you, it had such an outsized influence, right? And so like, what happens in 2025?
Look, I'm officially old. I have no idea. All my instincts are wrong. I get everything wrong. I was at Pebble Beach this year, and we're watching the Tour de Elegance. So it's the cars that are going to compete on Sunday. On Thursday, they drive around. So we're watching the cars goes by, and I'm freaking out. Like I should mention, I'm standing with 2 29-year-old journalists, right? And I'm like, this or that, and I've always been passionate about cars, and I know them all. And the one journalist, one of the 20-year-old journalists says, "How do you know all this?" And the other one, without missing a beat, goes, "Because he was on the launch." So
Oh,
I'm all in, baby.
oh.
I have no idea. It's you know, I meet a lot of I think they're called influencers these days. And I watch what they do, and I have no idea why they have 80 million followers. They have 80 million followers. So no clue. No clue whatsoever. And it's a great point. The thing about Jalopnik, and you know, if you ever get Spinelli on, like, who was the editor in chief, he had no idea. He just basically, like, his job went bad. You know, .com bust. He was having drinks and, you know, with Nick Denton one night and said, like, "Oh yeah," like jokingly, "we should start a car blog." And he's like, "Think of a name." And he thought of Jalopnik, and you know, which was like Jalopy and Peacenik, and great, now you have a car blog, do something with it. And he just started, and I I got hired, meaning that, like, if I made a post, I'd get paid for making that post. Zero input. Spinelli never said anything other than if I had something that was due every week, he's like, you know, every week means every week. I think that's the only editorial command he ever told me. Oh yeah, he said, don't use so many. He said, yeah, sorry, use more contractions. You're not Robert De Niro. Use more contractions. And that was it. We just did what we wanted to do, and I think that's a good lesson. And Jethro Bovington always says this. He says, you know, make the magazine you want to read. And in other words, make the website, make the video, make the podcast that you want to listen to. You know, make the video you want to watch. And I think that's key. And I think a lot of us really go into the weeds, like, well, here's what the consumer wants. They don't know. They're trying to burn time between, you know, water boiling and the mac and cheese being ready. Like they just want to be a little distracted. So might as well make it something you're passionate about. And, you know, odds are that'll be better than you trying to, like, answer to some imaginary voice in the sky. This is how it should be. You know, for lack of an answer, Kyle, I don't know. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I like that idea of I want to make the stuff that I want to see, right? So
Yeah.
unless yeah, no, it's sort of what a lot of us have done. And just before we let you go,
Really?
it's crazy talking to people of all ages in the industry. Like, most of us did not get into here by saying, I'm going to go to school to learn to write, and I'm going to go write cars right away. Like, we all came in because we just like cars, and weird back end ways. Like, I never thought or should have been where I am with cars. And yeah, so there's a lot of young people say, like, how do I get in? What do I do? And it's like, just really like cars and be willing to talk and show up at events and write. And, you know, if you can learn to do some of that stuff and you're interesting, then there's a chance. Like, it's not like being an engineer. We need to go hit these basics and then you're ready to go.
Yeah. And again, back to it. The other thing is, make sure you're on a podcast with Jerry Seinfeld. That really helps a lot. It's hard to, I was just at the Fat International Ice Race, and the number of people that came up to me to mention, you know, they love Spike's Car Radio was like half of the crowd. It was wild. So it's you know, in other words, get lucky.
Yeah.
I was actually just going to ask too. That was going to be my last question. Was why is that ice race the coolest race in the world? I stalked a little bit on social media and saw just before this.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think because nothing's at stake. So if you win, you get a cowbell, a literal off of an Austrian cow bell that says "fat" on it. It's there's kind of, you know, it's an ice race, so there's really no rules. You get 2 laps of practice. They pull you in, and then they send 3 cars for 3 laps. Fastest car wins, and then at the end they get the 4 fastest cars together, and they go out and do a lap, and then you get a cowbell, and it's it's great. You know?
Awesome.
Yeah, it's just really great. It's a lot of fun. It's smart. It's a one-day event. It's different. Yeah, it was, you know, and you know, this year got very lucky with the weather. It was like what would you guys say in centigrade? It was -1 most of the day, so that the ice wasn't too terrible and it wasn't too cold. And it, you know, I think last year it was like, you know, like 6, and it was slushy and rainy. And then, you know, other years it's just been like too cold. So this was really right on. So.
Yeah, sounds good. It's one of those things I hope to go witness in person one day. So
Yeah, and, it's one of those where the barrier to entry isn't crazy because I think it's like 130 euros for a ticket. It's a 1-day event. You got to get yourself to Zell Austria, which, okay, that's the challenge, but I can't imagine hotels cost all that much. It's a ski resort, and it's not like Pebble Beach where it's like, well, the lawn is $400 and the quail is $1,200. Hotel rooms are $2,000 a night. You got to get out to Monterey, California, which I don't know, depends where you're coming from, can be hard. So I think it's a pretty approachable, accessible event. And it was cool. It was cool. So
cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for
Nice.
being on again.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
we will definitely have you on again down the road. We'll find some new
Sure.
topics to talk about. There's so much you can always go through. We didn't even get to some of the stuff about like greatest cars you own and didn't own and stuff like that. So we'll get into that next time.
I've been peacefully tuning my little GR Corolla, and
Oh, nice.
I'm creating a little monster, which I'm very, very happy with. But,
In Chicago at the auto show, they brought the GR86 with the GR Corolla drivetrain in it again from SEMA. And I was like, oh, every time I see it, I'm like, just do it. But I know they won't. Anyway.
yeah, mine's gonna be cool. I'll plug this. So, what's today? The 7th. So on the 17th of February, my little car is gonna be on the Jay Leno show. So Jay's gonna drive it, the full build, and that'll be on YouTube. And it's at a pretty good point right now, and it's going on Monday. A couple last minute little upgrades, and it's fun. It's a good car.
All right. Look forward to seeing that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks again, Johnny.
Thanks, boys. Yeah, anytime.
Great. All right. That's been a fun episode. We had a lot of fun talking with Johnny and talking about all these Foresters. It seems it somehow came up again in that conversation. It's the Forester Show, brought to you by AutoGuide and eBay Motors. So we'll just let people go because it's getting on. Just quickly, next week we're going to compare some minivans. So I'm looking forward to that as the suburban dad. And this week I drove nothing. Kyle, what did you drive?
I drove the Alpina XB7, and it
practical.
was it's something. So I will have that soon to talk about on a future episode. Also, we'll be at a different auto show next week.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you again for listening to the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors, and we will be back next week.
So long, everybody.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything, brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love.